Hey gang, and welcome back. This is actually not a reminder, but rather an announcement. Flipside Gaming is now selling some exclusive Richard Kane Ferguson playmats, which you'll see in this video. There's Dakin Blackblade, Solkanar the Swamp King, Pillage, and Nebuchadnezzar. They're free shipping within the US, and you can use the promo code to help get 10% off. No one asked for it, possibly no one wants it, but we did it anyway. This week's game features exclusively mono-red commanders. Kevin is playing his Purphoros deck and keeps a hand with Faithless Looting, Hordling Outburst, Skirk Prospector, Hissing Iguanar, Mimic Fat, Sneak Attack, and a Mountain. I am playing Daretti, and I keep a hand with 3 mountains, Wheel of Fortune, Blasphemous Act, Mere Turbine, and Sequestered Stash. Dario is playing Norin, and keeps 4 mountains, Confusion in the Ranks, Goblin Matron, and Reiterate. And last but not least, we have Chris, who has his own YouTube channel, which is called BT Game Night, and it focuses on 1v1 EDH games, is playing his Etali deck and keeps a hand with 3 mountains, Mana Crypt, Sentinel Totem, Sensei's Divining Top, and Felden's Cane. Chris wins the die roll and starts us off. Chris plays a mountain and casts Sensei's Divining Top. Kevin plays a mountain and casts Soul Ring. I play a mountain and I pass to Dario. Dario plays a mountain and casts Norin the Wary. Chris plays a mountain and passes. Kevin draws but has no second land, so he casts Faithless Looting. He discards 2 cards, one of which is Pyroblast because it does absolutely nothing this game, and passes. I play a mountain, and I pass my turn. Dario plays a mountain and casts Tormod's Crypt. This exiles Norin, as does any other spell or attack, which I enthusiastically enforce Dario to show. For the sake of saving time, it's safe to assume that Dario will exile Norin every time something gets cast or attacks, as he should. Chris plays a mountain and casts Sentinel Totem. Kevin draws and plays a mountain. He then casts Goblin Assault and drops Skirk Prospector. Moving to combat, Kevin gains a Goblin token with haste and swings it at me for 1. I play a mountain for my turn and cast Vandal Blast to blow up Kevin's Soul Ring. Dario plays a mountain and casts Goblin Matron. He goes and grabs Gamerz Havoc Razor. At the end of Dario's turn, Chris uses his Sensei's Divining Top to look at the top 3. Chris plays an Inkmoth Nexus as his land for turn and casts Mana Crypt. He then pays 6 to cast Etali and pass. Kevin sacrifices his Goblin token in his main phase to the Prospector for 1 red mana, and pays 3 to flashback Faithless Looting. Moving to combat, Kevin swings the Prospector and the new Goblin token at Dario for 2. I play Ghost Quarter from my land for turn, and count up the creatures. I then cast a Blasphemous Act for 3, and Kevin floats 2 red by sacrificing his Goblins. With nothing else, I pass to Dario. Dario plays a mountain and casts Shattering Spree to blow up the Mana Crypt. He then casts the Gamerz he tutored for and passes turn. Chris plays a Thran Dynamo and taps it to activate his top. He then plays a Felden's Cane and passes turn. Kevin can't find his 3rd land and instead has to cast Carry Zev. Moving to combat, he makes a Goblin token and hits Chris for 1 before passing to me. For my turn, I play an Urza's Tower and pay 2 to cast Arcbound Ravager. I then decide to cast Wheel of Fortune as I've drawn almost exclusively lands since turn 1, and the table discards their hand and then draws 7. Of course, I draw 6 lands out of the 7, and I pass to Dario. Dario plays a mountain and moves to combat. He is forced to swing Gamerz, so he aims him at Chris. Chris takes 2 and exiles the top card of his library, a spellbook, which Dario casts. In his second main phase, Dario casts Manic Vandal, blowing up Chris's Thran Dynamo. Dario then casts Humble Defector and passes turn. Chris plays a mountain and casts Survey the Wreckage, blowing up my Ghost Quarter. He gets a Goblin token that has to attack, but it doesn't have haste, so it can't this turn. Kevin plays a mountain and casts Felwar Stone. He then casts a Young Pyromancer and moves to combat. He gets another Goblin token and swings them at me. I take 2 and Kevin passes. I play a mountain for my turn and cast Daretti. I downtick Daretti, sacrificing my Ravager to try and bring back Darksteel Forge. Dario decides to pump the brakes on this play and sacrifices his Tormod Crypt to exile my graveyard. With nothing else, I pass. In his main phase, Dario taps the Humble Defector to draw 2 cards and gives it to Chris. He then plays a mountain and moves to combat. He swings Gamerz and the Vandal at me for 4. He exiles my top 2 cards and hits Trash for Treasure and a mountain. Dario then casts Smuggler's Copter and suspends a Wheel of Fate. With nothing else, he passes to Chris. Chris draws for turn and taps the Humble Defector to draw 2 cards. He donates the Defector to me, and then Chris plays a mountain and casts Geosurge. This gives him 6 red mana for artifacts and creatures, and he needs only to tap 2 lands to recast Etali. Moving to combat, we forget that Chris has to attack with his token, and we pass to Kevin. Kevin plays a land for his turn and casts Purphoros God of the Forge. He moves to combat, creating a goblin token and dealing 2 to his opponents. Kevin swings 2 goblins at me and 1 at Daretti, and swings Carry Zev at Dario, who triggers on attack to create a monkey token. This has Purphoros deal 2 to all of Kevin's opponents, and I then take 2, and Dario takes 3 from combat damage. At the end of Kevin's turn, Dario casts Brand to bring back his Humble Defector. I play a land for my turn and recast Daretti. I uptick my Walker to discard 2 lands and draw 2 cards before passing to Dario. Dario removes a suspend counter on his upkeep and plays a mountain during his main phase. He then taps the Defector to draw 2 and gives it back to me. Dario then casts Soul Ring, which exiles Norin, but in response to the exile trigger, he taps Norin to crew the Copter. He swings all of his creatures at Kevin for 7 and exiles the top 3 cards of Kevin's deck. Dario then casts Star Compass that he exiles, but doesn't want to wipe the board. Dario then casts Gamble and discards a mountain, which is probably not the card he tutored for. Dario then casts Ensnaring Bridge and passes turn. Chris plays a Nykthos and casts Lightning Greaves. He equips the Greaves onto Etali, who can't actually attack anymore. Chris then casts Desperate Ritual, using the mana to cast Chandra Pyromancer. He upticks her to deal 1 to the Defector and 1 to me. We then remember Chris has to attack with a token, and he hits me for 1 more. Kevin plays a Mountain and casts a Goblin War Marshal, dealing 4 to all of his opponents. Kevin then casts a Spawning Pit and moves to combat. He gains another Goblin token, dealing 2 more to all of his opponents. He swings 4 of his tokens at Daretti, and swings Carry Zev at Dario, who makes another Monkey token and deals a further 2 to all of Kevin's opponents thanks to Purphoros. Kevin also swings the Young Pyromancer at Chris, but Chris blocks with Etali. I play a Mountain and uptick Daretti, discarding the Unstable Obelisk and Blightsteel Colossus, shuffling the Colossus in before drawing 2. I then cast a Wormcoil Engine to hopefully gain some life when I block, and I pass to Dario. Dario removes another Suspend counter from his Wheel of Fate, and casts a Burnish Heart in his main phase. He moves to combat, and swings a Grenzo and Vandal at Kevin once more. Kevin blocks with the token from the War Marshal and the War Marshal itself. He then sacrifices the War Marshal to the Spawning Pit once the blocks are declared, and gains another Goblin token as it dies, which has Purphoros trigger and deal 2 to all of us. With nothing else, Dario passes, and Chris activates his top at the end of Dario's turn. Chris plays a Winding Canyon for his land for turn, and upticks Chandra to deal 1 to Kevin and kill 1 of the Goblin tokens. Kevin responds by sacrificing the Goblin token to the Spawning Pit. Chris then casts Hedron Archive and moves to combat. He swings the Goblin token at Kevin, who, before leaving the Declare Attacker's steps, removes 2 counters from the Spawning Pit to make a 2/2 artifact spawn. This deals 2 to all of Kevin's opponents, and before moving to blocks, Chris casts Lightning Bolt to kill the spawn. Dario has some action for this though, and casts Fork while the bolt is on the stack, and redirects his copy to the Wormcoil Engine. Dario then casts Radiate, and basically wipes the board of all creatures, deals 3 to all players and all planeswalkers. With all these lightning bolts on the stack though, Kevin sacrifices all of his creatures to Spawning Pit. My Wormcoil Engine then dies, and so does Daretti. Chris then passes, and Kevin makes a Spawn token at the end of turn to deal 2 more damage with Purphoros to everyone. Kevin does redirect the damage from Chris to Chandra though. Kevin untaps and draws for his turn, and pays 6 to cast Goblin Marshal, who comes in with 2 Goblin Buddies to deal 6 damage to Kevin's opponents. With the Norin exile trigger on the stack, Dario crews the Thopter. Kevin decides to have 2 of the damage redirected to Chandra, and he moves to combat. He gains a Hasty Goblin token, which has Purphoros take me out of the game. With nothing else, Kevin passes turn. I remind Dario to downtick the wheel on his turn, but we're all pretty sure the table won't live long enough to see it. Dario then pays enough to cast Blasphemous Act, and Kevin sacrifices the Goblin Marshal to the Spawning Pit, which brings in 2 more goblins and deals 4 to Chris and Dario. Kevin then sacrifices the rest of his creatures to the Spawning Pit. At the end of Dario's turn, Chris sacrifices the Hedron to draw 2 cards. Chris draws for turn and activates Top. He then sacrifices Feldon's Cane to shuffle his library and tops once more. He is able to find Oblivion Stone, but is actually 1 mana short to be able to cast it and activate it, which all but seals the game for Kevin. On Kevin's turn, he's able to make a bunch of tokens thanks to the Spawning Pit, and wipes out Chris. Game review time. So, going into this game, I think we all agreed that Red pretty much has no way to deal with enchantments outside of very few cards like Chaos Warp or Scour from Existence. It was basically a race to see if we'd either keep Kevin off of casting Purphoros, or if someone else casted Purphoros, dealing with that. It also didn't help that Chris playing Etali was always a threat, because if he swung once, he could possibly get up to 4 free cards, which is too many cards. Yes, there was the argument he could have hit lands, but chances are he would have at least hit 1 card. Dario's Norin deck is a pleasure to see, and I'm actually kind of glad that I wheeled when I did, even though it was a pretty risky move, because Dario was about to resolve a confusion in the ranks, which would have made editing this video a nightmare. I can't remember the last time I was that flooded in terms of lands, and even with a wheel and upticking Daretti, I still seem to draw more lands than actual cards. The deck could probably use a few tweaks here and there, but I certainly want to add a couple cards thanks to Dominaria. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.